go way back, Dondré. It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Please, thank you for having me.
Let me just tell you, this book blessed me so much. You know, I was expecting one thing. I was expecting it to be about just male versus man and what the true meaning of a man is versus a male. But I didn't know that there was so much of, your personal spiritual journey included in this book. And it just really blessed me.
I had to, first of all, thank you. It, in writing the book, I think that the chief motivator for me writing this book was, number one, my father never showed up for me as a father and never got around to doing so because he never matriculated into manhood himself. Last year, I came back east, as this is more for the audience and not you, of course, but, growing up in Brooklyn, being a diehard East Coaster, I've been living in, Los Angeles for the better part of 2 decades now. I got brought back home to shoot probably the most important thing that I've ever worked on in my life. And unfortunately, during that time, my father was on his deathbed. Oh. And we, every day for 2 weeks, I went to the hospital to really interview him, figure out how we got to this place. My father and I were, when I was 6, my father kidnapped me. When I was 12, my father taught me how to be a cheater. At 13, my father went to jail for manslaughter, killing someone. Didn't get out until he was 26. You mentioned me being on All My Children. At that time, when I found out that he had gotten out, I was living in New Jersey, had bought my first house, my first expensive luxury car. I come back to Brooklyn to find him. And I was going to, as they say, hurt people hurt people. I was going to find him and I was going to do to him what he did to me when I was 6, what he did to me throughout my entire life. Because at that point, I didn't have the skill sets that I have now.
Yeah.
So I was leaning on what the street taught me, which is when someone disrespects you, when someone hurts you, you have the right to chop their head off.
What were you planning on doing?
So I not planned, I did. I went and picked my father up when I was 6, when he kidnapped me from my mother.
Literally kidnapped you?
Yeah. Yeah.
For how long?
I was gone for 2 days, and on that last night, I woke up in the backseat of his car at about 3:00 in the morning, and he was nowhere to be found. It was like a movie scene, abandoned Brooklyn street, one street light on. It's dark, it's creepy. 6-year-old.
What did you do?
I did what my mother had prepared me for.
Your mother prepared you at 6 years old.
She taught me immediately to know my name, my address, my phone number, all of those things. So I could rattle them off really quickly. 638 Wilson Avenue between Cooper and Moffett. My phone number 718-574-6144. I'm 52 years old and it's still drilled in my head.
Wow.
And so when I got out, I saw a bakery down in the distance, had to cross this dangerous 6-way street in Brooklyn, get across there, go inside, rattle this thing off to the guy who was in there. And my mom, who didn't have a car at that time, they had to get a cab to come get me, pick me up, bring me back home. It was one of the most traumatizing, as you can imagine at 6 years old, traumatizing events that you could ever imagine. So at 26, now notice the numbers. So 20 years later, I picked my father up, and Big Me was going to tell him about how he hurt Little Me. And I told him, if I ever see you again, I'm gonna kill you. And I kicked him out of my car, made sure he was good and far from his house, like I was good and far from mine when he kidnapped me at 6.
Wow.
My father and I didn't speak again for another 20 years.
Oh my gosh.
So I was 46 years old. My daughter, who was then 11 years old, comes downstairs, sits down next to me on the couch and says, Dad, do you know where your father is? No segue, no nothing. Do you know where your father is? I knew, but I didn't have the courage to tell her that I knew. Because I knew that her next question would be, why have you been cheating me out of this relationship with my grandparent? And she just kept asking me a bunch of questions. And the last 2 were the ones that just crushed me. She said, is that my grandfather? And am I ever going to meet him? And in that moment, it was like she was saying to me, listen, whatever you haven't healed in yourself, don't break in me. Don't cheat me out of my experience of another grandparent.
Yeah.
And I knew that God had sent a messenger to me. The first messenger he sent was my wife. And I played the man card. This is a man thing. You don't know nothing about this. Leave us alone. Talk about it. And my wife is, although she's from the south side of Chicago and she is no shrinking violet, she wanted no part of Brooklyn Dre at that point.
Brooklyn Dre. I'm going to hear more about him later.
Two versions of myself, Brooklyn Dre and Disciple Dondré. 2 distinct, right? One male, one man.
Right.
But I knew that God had sent me a messenger that I couldn't shoo away. He knew that I would have to deal with that because I take being a father very seriously.
Yeah.
I'm very serious about being the best father that I can be because that was my own deficiency. I didn't have a father. So I go back to Brooklyn. I find my father. And here's the reason why we didn't connect. Because I had been telling myself a story about my father. The story was that my father was never going to change. That my father was always going to be the male that I had experienced as a child. And despite the fact that I had matriculated my way into manhood, the story that I was telling myself was that my father was never going to. Find my father, we reconnect, we reconcile, we talk. And what I discovered quickly was that while we were 2 men of 2 different faiths, we were still 2 men of faith. And that just, I was just in tears because I had cheated us out of 20 years that I just couldn't get back. And oddly enough, my father had done all this elevation, this matriculation in prison, because as I often tell people, in order for you to come into your manhood, manhood doesn't come with an age. So you don't, it's not a magical, not at 18, not at 21. Car companies think the magic age is 25. So at 25, they think all of a sudden you're about to, be this responsible human being, and they're going to rent you a car.
Yep.
Right. Still having absolutely nothing to do with your manhood. Your manhood comes when you receive information and instruction. And then when you receive that information and instruction, you need loving but firm accountability. Well, in prison, my father got information and instruction through Islam, through the brothers that he was connected with in prison, and they were his accountability partners, loving but firm. So by the time he got out of prison, he was walking upright. And I, even though it was directly in front of me at 26, I couldn't see him because I had already painted him.
Yeah.
I had already painted him as the male that had hurt me and that had abandoned me, abused me. And yet there he was standing directly in front of me, perfectly upright. And I couldn't see him because I was looking at him through a specific filter that I had created in my own mind based on the past.
Yeah.
So we reconcile at 46.
What was that conversation like, Dondré?
In my mind, I didn't think that I needed our connection. In my mind, I thought that I was being a father to my children and that I needed to bridge this great chasm between the two of us for their sake. Having no idea that I needed it more than anyone. So I was just being this divine father, and I was making this divine sacrifice for my children. It wasn't until our last year together that I finally realized that I needed that connection more than anyone. At 46, I thought, well, I don't need my father because I'm already a father. But the reason why a man needs his father is because his father informs him so much of what's inside of him.
Yeah.
So better understanding my father was better understanding myself.
Yeah.
And on my father's deathbed for 2 weeks, every day I came to the hospital after doing my work. I would come in and I would talk to him and I would just ask all the questions that filled in all the blanks that I had my entire life. And I remember I said to my mother, who has never been able to heal past all of the wounds that she got in dealing with my father, who at the time when she was dealing with him, she was dealing with a different monster, pun intended.
Yeah.
She never healed past that. So I completely understood why she could never allow me the space to wonder about my father.
Did she resent you in any way for rekindling that relationship, or she did? That must have been tough, though. Oh my gosh.
It's the most painful. There were so many painful things about all of that because my curiosity about my father was deemed as traitorous.
Because you had a stepdad and she felt like that filled the void, but you needed to know where you came from, right?
It's the equivalent of an adopted child.
Right.
No matter how good or great the adoptive parents are, that child is going to seek out their biological parent, usually because they need to figure out chemically who they are, where they come from.
Their DNA, yeah.
Who is my, where did I get this DNA from?
Mm-hmm.
And I even explained this to my mother, but of course, you know, theoretically that sounds great. But again, we're dealing with human beings.
Right.
And we're dealing with, you know, the kinds of things that cause great trauma. And so for the longest time, all of my feelings about my father, I had to keep to myself. It wasn't safe for me to share with my mom.
Yeah.
And so for the first time, when I told her that my father was dying, and remember, this is 52 years in the making, my mother finally, for the first time, said something that was not venomous. She said, "Tell your father I said, hang in there." It's the only time in my life that I got to hear my mother say anything that felt loving about my father. I felt empathetic about my father. And so that was a gigantic moment for me. And I remember going into the hospital that day, and I said to my father, I said, "Pop," I couldn't even call him dad because we didn't have that kind of. Being a father and being a dad are two different things. Your father is who you come from. Your dad is who fathers you. I said, "Pop," my mom said, "Hang in there." And I remember how it stopped him in his tracks. And he reaches over and he grabs his phone. He's losing his touch. He's thumbing through his phone. I have no idea what he's doing. And he stops at this thing that he was looking for, turns the phone around. It's an image of my mom at 16 years old, shortly after she had me. They had me very young. And I remember that picture. I couldn't believe he still had it.
Wow.
And he said, "Dondré, I am not a stupid man. But at that time, I just did not know what I was doing. I would have been a better man had someone taught me how to be. I would have been a better father if someone taught me how to be." And it was so powerful. It was so, there was so much empathy I had for my father, because at that point I asked him, I said, "Pop, what kind of relationship," speaking to the fact that no one had taught him, I said, "What kind of relationship did you have with your father?"
Yeah.
He said, "I never had a relationship with my father." "You never had any relationship with your father?" "I never even met my father." "Pop, you never met your father?" "I never even saw a picture of my father." "Wait a second. You never even saw a picture of your father? You don't know what your father looks like?"
Jeez.
At that moment, anything that I had been harboring about my father, any hurts, any ill will, any anger, any animosity, was gone. Because what I saw was, I saw a little boy that never got what he needed.
Yeah.
And as a man, and I could hear God clearly because I remember asking for his help when I was 46 and on my way back into Brooklyn to try to reconcile with my father. I said, "You're going to have to help me." I said, "Because when I see this guy, I'm just going to want to punch him in the mouth.
Yeah.
I need you to help me." He said, "You don't need your father to be a father to you. You need to be a brother to your father."
Mm.
Those are big moments. Those are
Wow.
big moments. Those are big moments because I had come into a space of my own manhood, and because I was the father that I already was, again, I didn't need my father for that sake, but God was calling me to say, your father needs your brotherhood.
Mm. Jeez.
And you can't heal yourself until you walk this part of it out. How can you teach other men to be dynamic men? And here you are, you're still this broken boy about your father.
Mm.
So this book was written because I never again wanted any male who didn't have a model that they could mirror like my father didn't have, who didn't have a model that they could mirror like I didn't have. How do you receive the information and instruction when you don't have that model that you can mirror? Okay, well, now you get to read it. Now you get to receive the information and instruction. Now you get to have the loving accountability that you need from this book, or going to my digital series, Male versus Man, or going to my page, or any of those things. When you don't have it, it's built in for you. And then, look, just being perfectly honest, speaking all truth, my mother didn't have a father that taught her how to identify what a man looks like. See, if my mother had the father that she needed, she would have been able to better recognize the difference between a male and a man in order for her to become appropriately partnered in the first place.
Mm.
So the reason why this book is so necessary for our sisters is because it teaches them the difference between males and men.
Right.
The only thing that gets taught to our sisters is, girl, he's cute. Girl, he's fine. Girl, he got a good job. Girl, he got benefits. Girl, he got pecs. Girl. So somebody needed to give the information and instruction to our sisters in order for them to be able to readily identify the difference between a male and a man so they can become appropriately partnered. It is a vicious cycle. So our number one problem is that we don't produce enough men that produce other men. Our number two problem is that we don't produce enough women that know how to readily identify the difference between a male and a man.
So true. But Dondré, you have, I mean, that makes so much sense. And there's so much truth to that. You have so much valuable information. How did you even get to this point?
When I got married, which was this September will be 20 years.
Congrats.
And it will be 25 total together.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for that, because, marriage is a job.
Yeah.
Your love is, the love part is bliss. Mm-hmm. People don't fall out of love, they fall out of like. I realized early on that I didn't have any of those skill sets.
Mm.
None. Because who your father as a male, your father teaches you. When a guy knows how to work on a car, he doesn't know how to work on a car because he has a penis.
Right.
He knows how to work on a car. Usually his father taught him.
Right.
Sometimes it's your mom. Usually it's your father. Well, just like anything else in life, you only get good at things that you receive information and instruction about.
Absolutely.
It's just that simple.
Yeah.
If no one ever teaches you how to be a husband, one of the things that I loathe, or comments that I loathe the most, is when I hear people go, speaking about marriage, oh, don't worry about it, you'll figure it out. Will you?
Maybe,
It's the
maybe
equivalent. You're not gonna figure it out. You're gonna learn how to overlook pain. You're gonna learn how to not talk about the things that are ailing your relationship. You're gonna learn how to be a great actor, because all the stuff that you're feeling, you're gonna learn how to never deal with that. You're gonna learn how to not tell your partner how they hurt you. You're gonna learn how to not speak about the ills that are happening in your relationship. You're gonna learn how to become a great actor. That's what you're gonna figure out. You're gonna figure out the key to us staying together is the two of us winning Academy Awards every single day in this house together. Every day you're gonna be holding them like, I like to thank, because you're acting like you're acting like people are asking, how you guys do? We are good. We are good.
Yeah.
My wife and I, we've been together for 24 years, coming on 25. There are times that we are not good. Again, those are things that get taught. You don't just figure those things out.
You mentioned, speaking of Academy Awards, I know you did weigh in on this on social media, and Will Smith, what happened at the Academy Awards. I couldn't help but think about him when I was reading the book. And I know the book came out way before this happened, which is insane. Yes. But it's you talk about the 5 pain languages.
Yes.
And I just kept seeing that whole scenario. And I'm one of the people who, although I felt it was completely wrong what happened, I always try to put myself in another person's shoes. And I've been listening to his book. And so I understood where so much of that was coming from. It was coming from a place of pain.
Yes.
And it was coming, and so we can't overlook it. Yes, it was absolutely wrong, but it was coming from pain. Talk about your feelings on that.
So astute, that observation, because, and here's why it's so important for all of us to deal with our pain, because when we don't, we create a lot of pain in others.
Absolutely.
As you talked about, the Cosby Show. Cosby Show was my first job. I was 15 years old. Just to juxtapose one from the other, at 14, still in Brooklyn, I had a gun put to my head while they robbed my best friend's leather bomber jacket. The next year at 15, I get the Cosby Show. People often ask me, what's one of the greatest performances that you've ever done on the screen? Like, Robert is on the Cosby Show, because I was nothing like Robert. I think I grew up my life was the complete antithesis of his existence. The greatest problem Robert ever had in his life was figuring out what sweater he was going to wear that day.
That was a great character.
I had a gun put to my head.
Yeah.
What Bill Cosby he taught me so much. He taught me how to be, a professional in this industry. He taught me how to pursue higher education. He taught me how to be philanthropic, all of these things, right? The greatest lesson that I ever learned from Bill Cosby was one that he didn't teach me directly, but that I learned through observing his life. And that is that the greatest role that you're ever going to play in this life is that of a man. Because when you don't play it well, it will taint and tarnish anything that you ever accomplish in this life.
Mm.
So when you say the name Bill Cosby now, what's the first thing you think of? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So all of the things, top 5 comedian, despite anybody you ask, a comedian, a layman, top 5 on anybody's list in terms of stand-up. Maybe the greatest television show in television history.
Yeah.
Biggest philanthropist, all of those other things. But again, because you don't play the role of a man well, it now has tainted and tarnished everything you've ever done. Well, now let's move on to the Academy Awards. The thing that you covet the most, this trophy, this statue, this is going to be it. This is the coup de grace. This right here is the greatest moment of my life. Now coupled with the worst moment of my life. Because every time I look at this now, it's going to remind me of my greatest professional moment and my worst personal moment.
Yeah.
This is the reason why it's so important for us to deal with our pain, or eventually our pain will deal with us. There's no way for you to be angry before you are hurt.
Mm.
You have to be hurt first in order to become angry. There's never a time where you are angry without being hurt first. What am I in pain about? It's the impetus for everything. There's a huge difference between my passions and my purpose.
I love how you talk about this in the book. Yeah.
Right. It's the truth.
Yeah.
Acting is a passion of mine.
Mm-hmm.
It has been for, too many decades. I won't say it. That is just a passion.
Yeah.
Golf is a passion. Scuba diving is a passion. Horseback riding is a passion. None of those aforementioned things are my purpose.
Yeah.
Acting is a passion that gave me a great platform.
For your purpose. Yeah.
Our passions feed us. Our purpose feeds others.
I love that.
Okay.
Yeah.
When God created us with the intention of us being someone of service to others.
Right.
By the way, that's the key to sustained happiness. It's not money. It's not Chanel and Louis Vuitton bags. It's not Christian Louboutin shoes. It's not diamonds. It's not expensive cars. Many of our folks their minds are going to be blown right now. Because what they've been fooled into thinking is, to all of our brothers, it's not about owning 250 pairs of J's. I know that's killing you guys right now. But here's what I want you to know. That's not the same thing.
Right.
Happiness, particularly sustained happiness, is when you are in service to other people. The reason why most people never get to their purpose is because they're always running from their pain. But in your pain lies your purpose.
Dondré, what did it take for you to get to that point where you realize, this spiritual journey? I mean, you do mention in the book, and it was so tragic. I mean, the tragic death of your best friend. Is that what was the catalyst to this journey to just really work on your spiritual relationship with God?
No question about it. It was my own symbolic death. Because when my best friend died, I died too.